Hey there, welcome back. It's Pixel Lazy here again. It's been a couple days since I posted a video, but it's in the meantime, the last time I loaded this game up, actually, I was going to sit down and do this flight, and it turned out there was a 12 gigabyte update to Microsoft Flight Simulator. So instead, a day later, Sunday evening, I guess, I'm gonna fly out and leave Markovo Airport in kind of central Russia and start heading south. I'm going to another airport I can't pronounce, Tilachiki, which is kind of it's about 150 nautical miles south of here. So we're on this little grass landing strip pointed west at the moment, which is sort of the direction we want to go. And we're just going to take off and probably fly over a whole bunch of more Russian, Siberian-ish tundra up in the northern outreaches of Russia. If you haven't been following along, if this is the first time you've seen a video, I am flying around the world in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I left from my hometown airport of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I flew down through Alberta, British Columbia, out to the west coast. I flew up towards Alaska along the west coast, traversed Alaska, and then now I'm in Russia, after crossing the Bering Sea. And this is this little town of Markovo. You can see there's kind of some sketchy satellite imagery. It's kind of literally half winter here. And we're just gonna do a little flyover as we turn south.
Markovo Center, Lazy Lima 116 is type Cessna Skyhawk 1 miles north of Uniform Hotel Mike Oscar. Request flight following.
Lazy Lima 116 Markovo Center. Squawk 6165.
Squawk 6165, Lazy Lima 116.
This is looking like it's going to be about a 2-hour flight again once we get going. Here's our airport. My plane's name is Pixel. My call sign is Lazy. And I'm doing my best to log all these flights at pixellazy.ca, which is my website. I'm going to get some altitude here, and I'll check in when I'm a little further along. I'm about an hour into the flight at this point. I did a climb up to about 8,000 feet, and then I've just sort of been... I dropped my engine throttle down and just slowly letting myself lose altitude. I was at 8,000 feet about half an hour ago, and it's just kind of bobbing up and down, and I figure I'll be down around 2,000 feet in the next half an hour, 45 minutes. Depends on a number of things, of course. Fuel, for one. I mean, I had a comment on my videos that I always seem to run into the red on the fuel, but that's really what I end up doing is defaults to 50% fuel, and then it kind of gives you a map of where you can fly on 50% of the tank of fuel. And I never really push it right to the edge, but I usually go, 80% of the way to the edge of that circle is my next destination. As I get closer to some more populated areas and some civilization, I might make shorter hops because there'll be more to look at. I'll probably burn just as much fuel and time doing that, but these long haul stretches across barren landscapes, it's not really... You burn most of your fuel climbing, and then you don't burn as much as you fall. And of course, as your plane lightens up, aerodynamics change a little bit. I was talking to a friend earlier today, actually. We were chatting about this, and I told him he knows I'm doing this virtual trip around the world. He's a pilot, not a current pilot. He has a pilot's license. He hasn't really flown in about 20 years, but he knows lots of pilots. So he's got a lot of experience. And he was saying that flying through Russia is a really interesting experience because, of course, the airports are different and they're operated differently. The fee structure is different. So if you were a little plane like this, you'd pay as much as like a 747 to land. I don't know if that's still true, but it was when he was a pilot. And of course, the fuel was a little sketchy. So talking about fuel, I really should have, as he said, 10 jerry cans full of fuel from North America, because you'd land in these airports and the fuel would just be garbage. So you'd end up wrecking your plane and taking your life into your hands. Like I said, I'm about halfway. The terrain is, kind of a little bit of mountains, low mountains, a lot of tundra, some rivers, coming up on some lakes here. It's interesting. It's not civilization, obviously. I did some returns back to, actually I flew out of Vancouver on the weekend, or yesterday, the weekend. It's still the weekend. Flew out of Vancouver yesterday after my big patch downloaded, 11 or 12 gigabytes, I said. Obviously, after that 3-hour load time, I didn't have a lot of time to play, so I loaded up Vancouver and just did a scoot around in my Icon jet. And obviously, this is much different. This is a lot of just barren landscape, where that was flying over city, familiar city, because I used to live there. So I burned a good hour just swooping and doing low passes over things that were familiar, and obviously there's less incentive to do that when you're just flying over this barren landscape, which even the satellite imagery is a little, I guess, pretty low res, so it looks like you're kind of cruising over a fairly low-end Google map. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting through some of these long stretches and getting down towards Japan. It's going to be probably another week or two. I plotted it out, and it's going to be a few, like probably 6 of these long haul stretches. So this is the first of those remaining 6. First of about, or the third or fourth of about 10. And then I should get down into Asia, and hopefully there's a lot more to look at. I'll be doing some shorter haul flights and doing a lot more spinning around those areas. In the meantime, I'm just gonna do some short multi-leg videos, I think, and show you what there is here, and just to show you that I have done these long flights. I'm about 25 miles outside of my destination today. Kind of hit a bit of low mountains, and I'm looking at the map on my other screen, on my approach, my GPS map. You can see it in the bottom right corner of the screen there. I have a larger version of that on my other monitor. I can get a little bit more of a zoomed out view of my full flight. And it looks like these mountains sort of approach down into a little bit of an inlet, an arm of the, I don't know if it's a sea, but the destination I'm headed towards today is a little town, looks like, very small, probably a bush runway kind of thing, grass landing strip of some kind, and it's just kind of at the edge of these mountains. So these mountains sort of run up almost to the coast. In the last maybe 2 or 3 miles, we kind of taper off into the ocean, and just past that, I will be having to do a quick descent. As you can see, I've been slowly losing altitude. Now I've got the challenge of not losing too much altitude and crashing my plane into a mountain, or low mountains as they are, but yeah, we'll keep going. We should be landing, according to this, in about 15 minutes. As you can see, the Tilachiki Airport has appeared about 4.5 miles out, and I've got a lot of altitude to lose. I hadn't dropped as much as I thought. I think that fuel calculation came into play. Might have to do some circling here to kind of lose some altitude. I know the runway is sort of running north to south there, from what I can see on my map, so at the risk of causing myself and my co-pilot to lose our lunches in the cockpit there, I'm gonna do a quick accelerated descent, lose some altitude, and hopefully get some clearance to land here in the next minute or two. Again, what I think I'm looking for is a runway in the 20s would be nice, low 20s. That means I'm on the right approach. Looks like there's a little town there. I'm going to do a little flyover of the town, catch it out the side of our wing just as we're landing. I see some buildings out here. I guess that's something I've noticed flying over those vast Russian landscapes. Whether or not there are actually buildings out in the middle of nowhere, I assume people live out there a little bit, but you get a small little coastal town like this, and I would imagine that this is just a small population, maybe 1,000 people. There's probably some farmlands around here. Whether or not it's just that nobody lives up further.
Uniform Tango India Charlie traffic Lazy Lima 116.
There we go, runway 20.
600 feet inbound to land runway 20.
Let's see. We've got way too steep of a descent here, but we need to lose some serious altitude. I've got dead stick right now. Killed my engine, dropped the throttle completely. Got clearance to land on this little runway right beside this little Russian town. Isn't that cool? Just slam on the brakes right when we hit. I think we're gonna miss it. I'm gonna take off and try again. Forget that. Touch and go. Not even a touch. Alright, so you just witnessed my first ever aborted landing. Saw how quickly that the end of that runway came off. Last thing I'd want to do is drive into the water. It gives us a bit of a chance to swoop around and view some of this interesting scenery. It's quite cool. I will try not to get too much altitude here. I'm already gaining too much. Just kind of keep it low. We'll try again on our approach. Not the epic arrival I was hoping for, but better safe than sorry. See my shadow down there in the grass, kind of close to the ground. Hopefully that's enough. be too high.
Uniform Tango
Till the
India
throttle.
Charlie traffic, Lazy Lima 116
Try this
is on
again.
final runway 20 to land.
Going a little bit slower. Losing our altitude pretty quick. Should have done my flaps a little better. Slam on the brakes. Oh, here we go, here we go. And it's hard to tell where the runway ends, but I would say that was a successful landing. And we're just going to roll into the ocean. But there you go. I am going to call that a successful landing, and I will take off again probably tomorrow and conclude this video as I fly to my next destination. Welcome to Tilachiki. Welcome back. We're still in Tilachiki, Russia. As you can see, it's just kind of morning over there. I am going to take off. I just landed here yesterday, and I'm gonna take off again and do hopefully a quick run over to what is also Tilachiki Airport. We're just in a, I know that's kind of confusing actually. There's two airports named Tilachiki. This town we're in, we're just flying out of. It's a pretty picture. It's not actually called Tilachiki. I looked on Google Maps, it's something else. I will maybe look that up at some point. But there's actually a town called Tilachiki, and there's an airport about 100 miles away that is also called Tilachiki Airport. It has a different, 4-letter airport code. But we're going to do those 2 points. We're going to connect them together and continue our flight through northern Russia as we try and get down to some interesting, well, more interesting than Russian tundra, some interesting locations in the world. If you've been watching this video so far, I left from a place called Markovo. That was about 160 miles to Tilachiki. And now we are headed south over a little peninsula here. And on the south end of this peninsula, sort of extends out to the right there. And we're going to fly across this landmass over a couple low mountains, and we'll land on the other side, and another 100 miles off our trip around the world. I will check in a little bit later. I'm only about 10 minutes into the flight so far. I really like sunrises in this game. Thought that was worth sharing. Got some kind of low-lying cloud. We're at about 5,000 feet. This is not really low-lying. It's kind of mid-level cloud. You get some high cloud, some middle cloud, and you got the sun coming up over the eastern horizon there. The landscape's not much to look at these days as we fly over northern Russia, but certainly anywhere you go in the world, sunsets are kind of a common denominator, I guess. We're about midway over this peninsula towards our destination. The sun is up. Clouds are mixed, fluffy. Just flew through some thick, like high clouds behind us. Opened up into this bit of a rolling landscape. Got maybe another half an hour to go. This is a fairly generic landscape, I guess. I mean, it's not too exciting. There's no buildings anywhere. I've been kind of watching to see if there's any sign of civilization. There's hundreds and hundreds of miles of rolling hills, and as you can tell, like some of the textures are fairly jagged, fairly rough, and so I'm not entirely sure if the lack of buildings, architecture, houses, roads is because the satellite imagery is low and the simulator isn't simulating things it can't see, or if this is just really the middle of nowhere in Russia. I assume there's a lot of landscape like this. I've seen documentaries on various channels in the past over the years, and I know northern Russia is fairly sparsely populated, but to be able to fly for hours and see nothing but rolling hills and tundra landscapes, and I thought I would see more. But that's the point of this. If you've just been following along, we're a little over 6 months into this global pandemic. Lockdown. I was actually supposed to be going to Chicago in about 3 weeks. I was gonna go run the Chicago Marathon, actually, and that was put on hold. The border between Canada and the US is still closed. I could fly around Canada, I suppose, but it's not really, if you don't have to go anywhere, why would you at this point? So we lost out on a couple international trips this year, and I decided to open up Microsoft Flight Simulator and see the world that way. I kind of itched the travel bug with some virtual travel in the simulator. And if you've been watching any of these videos, I've talked about this a little bit, but if you're new to this, this is Microsoft Flight Simulator. I mean, this is about 15 years since the last release of this, and the last one was fairly basic. I mean, for its time, it was always these systems are always fairly advanced for their times. But in the context of 2020, it was fairly rudimentary. It was nice planes, but flying over a fairly bitmapped landscape. Not much off what you might fly over in Minecraft or something like that. A little less colorful, obviously. And this one got released, and it uses Bing Maps and topographical data and live weather data to essentially simulate the planet using terabytes upon terabytes upon terabytes of data that is all rendered through AI engines, and that's what you see out in the world is not only just a simulation of flying through a pretend world, it's a simulation of the planet. So, I go over and I fly over these landscapes. Well, there's not great data up here. They aren't flying, for various reasons, they're not flying satellites over northern Russia. I'm sure there's surveillance issues, and I'm sure there's probably probably military data for all this, but you know, as far as civilian public data over what's going on over northern Russia, I imagine it's pretty sparse. But there's a little bit. I mean, there's obviously satellite imagery of these spaces, not high resolution stuff, but when you get into the cities, you see the high resolution imagery, and you can see how the AI interprets what it sees on the ground and what it knows about locations and cultural variations, and then tries to construct 3D landscapes based on what it knows. And you have to fly around that. It's as close to the real world as I can get from sitting in my basement, unable to travel anywhere else. So, as beautiful as sites like this are, mundanely beautiful, I guess, is you know, they're epic views of vast wildernesses I'll never see in real life. It's something. So for the second time in as many days, I find myself swooping down towards a airport named Tilachiki Airport in Russia. This is the southernmost version of that airport. I'm not sure what Tilachiki is. I think this little town we're about to fly over is actually the town of Tilachiki, if I'm pronouncing that right, which is highly unlikely because I don't speak Russian. But this is on the south shore of a fairly long peninsula. And I call it a peninsula, and I'll give you a little bit of context as I wait for landing clearance. Hopefully on airport or runway 20 something. That town we just flew over is at about the same latitude as Anchorage, Alaska. So that's how far north we are right now, in northern Russia. As we land here, and then we plan to take off, there's a peninsula that stretches out south, so straight ahead of us, so we're flying about south. We're going to follow that for the next few flights, and when we hit the end of that peninsula and start hitting a chain of islands that'll take us into Japan, we'll be at about the same latitude as Vancouver or Seattle.
Uniform Hotel Papa Tango, traffic Lazy Lima 1172 miles north, 400 feet inbound to land runway 20.
So as we land here on runway 20, I'll just tell you that so the next few days I basically have to fly about the distance of flying from Anchorage, Alaska down to Seattle just to get out of Russia. So that's roughly how far we have to go. This looks like a little grass landing strip on a little chunk of island out in the middle of some little sea somewhere.
Stall.
A little bit of a stall there, trying to lose my last bit of altitude. I'm not being very good at my flaps these days. There you go. We are in the second Tilachiki Airport. I'm not sure what this town is called, because I think the one across the ocean was Tilachiki, or the one across the bay there. This is a different little town, but we will probably be hanging out here for a couple days in between flights. And that's it. Thanks for watching. 2 more legs down on this flight around the world. Let me know if there's anything I should be watching for as I fly down this peninsula towards Japan, I think is my next big country stop. I know there's a giant mountain or volcano of some kind on this peninsula way down south. We're going to try and swoop in that in the next couple of flights, but until then, I'm just going to find a place to park at this airport and see you next time.